In April of 1841, Silas Ruttles fabricated an advertisement that abashed alike the cruelest acreage owners in South Carolina. He was agreement his daughter, Catherine, a 28-year-old woman belief over 260 lb beneath the complete ascendancy of an apprenticed man, alleged Ezekiel Cross, not as a nurse, not as a companion, as her buyer in every way that mattered except on paper. The white association of Colleton Canton was scandalized, but they had no abstraction what Ruttles was absolutely accomplishing or what Ezekiel Cantankerous would do to Catherine over the after months. By November, Catherine's anatomy had afflicted in agency no one could explain. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove acreage was annihilation but ash. What absolutely happened amid that apprenticed man and the acreage owner's daughter? What did he do to her that abashed anybody who witnessed it? Before we bear the advancing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and animadversion your accompaniment below. Now, let me booty you aback to breadth it all began. Spring in Colleton Canton, accustomed with back-breaking calefaction and clamminess that fabricated the air feels solid. The Macabre River confused boring through the low country, its aphotic baptized absorption Spanish moss that afraid from animate oak copse like burial shrouds. Rice paddies connected for miles, their abounding fields formed by hundreds of apprenticed bodies who confused through baptize up to their knees from aurora until dusk. This was abundance congenital on suffering, prosperity extracted from animal misery, all of it justified by men who asserted themselves that animality was artlessly the accustomed adjustment of things. Cypress Grove acreage sat on 800 acreage of moderately advantageous land. Its owner, Silas Ruttles, was not absolutely allotment of the county's elite, but abominably capital to be. He endemic 58 apprenticed people, which fabricated him affluent by best standards, but about able him as mid-tier in bounded society. The absolutely able families, endemic bags of acreage, and hundreds of slaves. They summered in Charleston and beatific their accouchement to universities in the north. Their names agitated weight that could accessible doors or abort reputations with a distinct word. Silas had affiliated Elizabeth Yancey in 1812, a abutment that brought abstinent acreage backing and a admired surname. Elizabeth had been a applied woman who kept accurate annal, and seemed added captivated in accumulation margins than amusing climbing. She died giving address in 1813 to a babe christened Catherine. For 28 years, Silas aloft Catherine abandoned while absorption his energies on accepting admission to the close circles of Canton power. He was an alpine man, attenuate in the way of bodies who balloon to eat a back captivated by obsession. His beard had gone gray prematurely, giving him a stringent actualization that akin his algid temperament. In business, he was accustomed for actuality shrewd, but atonement enough, the affectionate of man who would drive adamantine bargains, but accumulate his word. His babe Catherine had developed up isolated, able by tutors, never absolutely accepting anywhere. By 1841, she was 28 years old and advised about 260 lb. Her anatomy was bloated from years of medications assigned by doctors who diagnosed her with agitation and changeable afraid disorders. She suffered agitated fits breath, she would scream and bandy objects. She had attacked her ancestor with a letter opener the antecedent year, abrogation a blister aloft his larboard hand. The white association of Colleton Canton abreast about her with apocryphal sympathy, poor Silas Ruttles abounding with a mad daughter. What a shame she had been such a appealing child. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had witnessed aback. She was 12 years old, or that her carelessness was not carelessness at all, but a rational acknowledgment to active with monsters. The letter, accustomed on April 7th, delivered by private courier, Silas opened it in his study, assured business correspondence. Instead, he activated 3 pages on big-ticket cardboard, bankrupt with red wax, address, a attribute he accustomed immediately. A scythe aloft with aureate stalks, the mark of the aggregation of the harvest. The brethren, 13 men who aggregate in atramentus to accomplish rituals, they believed adequate the acreage through claret sacrifice. They alloyed old European traditions with behavior adopted from apprenticed bodies who accustomed alcohol and power. They believed the able were meant to absorb the weak, absolutely a back necessary. Silas had been able in 1822. He had abounding, conceivably, 40 gatherings over 19 years, accommodating in rituals that ranged from advancing to monstrous. The letter abreast him he was in debt, $12,000, adopted over years of coffer losses and bootless investments, and cool sum. Repayment would crave affairs best of his acreage, and all his slaves, antibacterial aggregate he had built. But the letter offered an alternative, a affirmation of charge from assembly in difficult positions. Silas would booty his babe Catherine and abode her beneath the complete ascendancy of one of his apprenticed men, not temporarily, not as punishment, as a 18-carat alteration of albatross abiding. 1 abounding year, the apprenticed man would acquire complete ascendancy over her person, her circadian activities, her treatment. Silas would advertise this about at an acquisition of the county's arresting families, answer it as an acute medical admeasurement for his daughter's condition. The abasement would be absolute. In a association breadth, white women were allegedly adored and adequate aloft all others. Silas would be declaring his babe account beneath than his property. But if he agreed, his debt would be forgiven, and the aggregation would accommodate banking abutment to restore his position. Silas sat in his abstraction for hours that night. He anticipation about his options. Bankruptcy would abort him completely. The aggregation had admission to every judge, every lawyer, every baby kisser in the region. They could accomplish him abandon if he became a problem. Or he could cede his daughter's address to advance his own position. The best association had able him to make. Acreage over people, ability over morality. He wrote his accepting by candle of fire and beatificate afore dawn. 3 canicule later, addition letter accustomed with a name and abrupt history. Ezekiel Cross, age 33. Purchased afresh through an agent from a Virginia plantation. Skills included carpentry and herbal medicine. Attitude listed as quiet and obedient. What the letter did not say was that Ezekiel Cantankerous had been alleged accurately for this purpose, that his adjustment at Cypress Grove was no accident, that he agitated his own afire char. For amends and the backbone to delay for absolutely the adapted moment, Ezekiel accustomed on April 13th in a wagon apprenticed by a bondservant banker, alleged Henderson. The wagon pulled anon to the Capitol House. Abnormal aback best bondservant affairs happened abreast the barns. Silas came out assimilate the porch. Concealment his eyes adjoined the morning sun. In the wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The aboriginal affair Silas noticed was his eyes. Best apprenticed bodies kept their boring bottomward as a adaptation mechanism, but Ezekiel looked anon at Silas, his advertisement calm and assessing. It fabricated Silas acutely uncomfortable. Ezekiel was tall, conceivably 6'2", with ample amateur and angular beef from a lifetime of adamantine labor. His back was bare by whipping scars. His clothes were simple but clean. His comely were ample and calloused, but his fingers had a tension that adapted able assignment rather than aloof animal force. Henderson climbed bottomward and handed affidavit to Silas. Ezekiel Cantankerous as requested. Antecedent buyer said he was quiet but capable. Your assembly appetite you to apperceive this one was anxiously selected. Silas about glanced at the papers. He addressed Ezekiel directly. You inquire why you are here. Yes, sir. Ezekiel's articulation was abysmal and abstinent with a slight Virginia accent. "My babe is unwell. You will be amenable for her care. Doctors acquire failed. You affirmation ability of herbal treatments. My grandmother was a healer, sir. She able me afore I was sold." The transaction completed quickly. Ezekiel was a parent to a baby birth, abreast the Capitol House, abstracted from added bondservant quarters. He was accustomed basal aliment and told his duties would activate the abutting day. He was abreast that his sole albatross was Catherine's affliction, and that abortion would acquire astringent consequences. Ezekiel nodded and said, "Yes, sir, a back required." Afresh he was labored alone. For the aboriginal time a back arriving, he accustomed his advertisement to change. His jaw unclenched slightly, his amateur relaxed. He sat on the bed and pulled from central his shirt, a baby bolt bundle. He unwrapped it carefully, complete allotment of beat cardboard with 3 names accounting in a child's ambiguous handwriting. Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth, his wife, his son, his daughter, awash abroad from him 3 years ago to a acreage in Alabama, accustomed for animate disciplinarian to death. He had abstruse, they all died oral 18 months. Sarah from basic fever. Benjamin from an abrasion that angry septic. Ruth from artlessly giving up a 6-year-old adolescent who chalk full bistro because she could not acquire why her ancestors had been access apart. And Silas Ruddled had been the one to advertise them. Not because he bare money, not because they had done annihilation wrong, but because he had been demonstrating to the aggregation that he could accomplish adamantine decisions afterwards. Sentimentality. He had breached ancestors like activation for burning. Ezekiel had spent 2 years animate his way south, advisedly accepting a wash from acreage to plantation, consistently acquisition information. He abstruse about the aggregation through whispers, he abstruse about their rituals and members, he abstruse they advised themselves aloft any consequence. Aback the befalling came to be a wash to Ruddled specifically. Ezekiel knew this was his chance. He would acquire admission to Ruddledig's house, to his secrets, to his vulnerabilities. And sometimes amends came not from courts or laws, but from backbone and planning, and actuality accommodating to become absolutely as aberrant as necessary. He bankrupted the cardboard with the 3 names and tucked it away. Afresh he lay aback and stared at the beam and began planning what came next. His aboriginal day began on April 14th. A bowed bondservant alleged Judith, middle-aged with graying hair, brought him to Catherine's allowance on the additional floor. She agape reluctantly, "Absence, Catherine, your ancestor has brought addition to advice with your treatments." A blast from inside, article abundant, hitting the wall. Afresh Catherine's voice, slurred but venomous. "I do not appetite added treatments. Send him away." Judith looked at Ezekiel with sympathy. "She has bad days." "This is one." Ezekiel opened the aperture and stepped inside, closing it afore Judith could follow. The allowance was ample but dark. Abundant curtains drawn, the air was stale, smelling of army bedding and article else, the candied wrought aroma of mercury. Books broadcast aloft the floor, an access account adjoined the wall, clothes everywhere. Catherine sat in an armchair by the algid fireplace, captivated in a decrepit bathrobe gown. Her aphotic beard afraid afar and tangled, her face was puffy, eyes unfocused, her calmly trembled continuously on the armchair arms. She looked at Ezekiel with confusion, a fresh fear, a fresh anger. "Who are you?" I said. "No added doctors." "I am not a doctor, miss. My name is Ezekiel. Your ancestor asked me to advise you. Help." She laughed harshly. "That is what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. They beggarly poison, they beggarly chains, they beggarly silence." She stood aback swaying. "I apperceive what this is. He is back, breaking me afresh for remembering, for speaking, for abnegation to forget." Ezekiel stood still, non-threatening. "What are you declared to forget?" The catechism bent her off guard. Her acrimony flickered to article added vulnerable. "You do not know. I apperceive nothing, miss. Abandon that your ancestor says you are unwell." Catherine advised him attentively, as if absolutely seeing him for the aboriginal time. You are not from here. Virginia, originally, miss, do you perceive what happens in this house, what they do in the cellar? Ezekiel's beating quickened, but he kept his advertisement neutral. I do not perceive what you mean. Liar, no califaction in it. Aloof exhaustion. Anybody lies. It is easier than truth. She sat heavily. Leave me alone. Acquaint my ancestor, his newest affliction failed. But Ezekiel confused to the window, and drew accessible the curtains. Sunlight abounding in, Catherine cried out, accoutrement her eyes. Aback did you aftermost go outside, miss? I cannot airing that far. I'm too weak. Aback did you aftermost eat afterwards Luden a minute. The anesthetic is necessary. Doctors say so. What if the doctors are wrong? Her calmly came bottomward from her eyes. She stared at him with achievement and alarm mixed. What did you say? Ezekiel angry from the window. This was the moment the aboriginal agenda played. I said, what if the doctors are wrong? What if aggregate you acquire been told about your activity is advised not to advise you, but to accumulate you controllable? What if your ancestor has been contagion you for years to ensure you never become able, bodied abundant to allege about what you saw? Complete silence. Catherine's eyes went wide, her abashed calmly stilled. For 30 seconds she, aloof, sat there, her apperception working. Aback she spoke, her articulation was different, clearer. He told you. Your ancestor told me nothing, miss, but I acquire eyes. I aperceive mercury poisoning. I aperceive abiding aristocrat use. Healthy women do not become like this afterwards addition, animate adamantine to accomplish them that way. Why would you say this? Suspicion crept back. This is a trick. You are testing me. I am cogent you. I can advise you become absolutely well, clear, minded, able, abundant to airing out of this room, but it will not be easy. Your anatomy has been abased on those medicines for years. Stopping will be painful. You will feel worse afore better, and your ancestor will not approve. Afresh, why would you do it? Ezekiel met her eyes, because I acquire my own affidavit for absent Silas, ruddled to suffer. And the best way to accomplish him ache is to accord him aback a babe who is sane, abundant to bethink, aggregate, and able, abundant to allege. About it, the accuracy alarming to allege so plainly, but Catherine was damaged, not stupid. She would see through manipulation, but 18. Carat accustomed account that she ability believe, you appetite. Animus on my father, yes, miss. What did he do to you? He awash my family, my wife, and 2 children. Beatific them to their deaths for no acumen, except to prove article to bodies who adjudicate. Account by cruelty. Catherine captivated this, afresh, nodded slowly. The brethren, he awash them for the brethren, not a question. The brethren, miss, you do not know. She laughed. Article berserk in it. You will learn. Anybody learns eventually. She leaned forward. If I agree, if I let you advise me, what happens then? You get well, miss, and aback you are well, we adjudge what to do next. I acquire my animus to plan, you acquire yours. Conceivably they align. Catherine advised him intently. Finally she spoke. I appetite them all dead. My father, adjudicator Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw. All of them, every man who stood in that cellar. I appetite them to ache first. To aperceive it is advancing to beg. Afresh I appetite them dead. The acidity was shocking, not for its intensity, but because it came from addition absolved as mad and harmless. This was not madness. This was acerbity concentrated by years of suppression. Ezekiel nodded. Afresh we acquire an understanding, absent. Catherine, if we are conspirators, use my name. I cannot, miss, not breath anyone ability here. We charge be careful. Afresh aperceive something, Ezekiel. Catherine's eyes glittered dangerously. I acquire asleep before. 3 people, abode disciplinarian who ability acquire told my ancestor about my apprehensible moments. I cannot bethink absolutely how. The Eldinum blurs everything, but I aperceive I did it. They disappeared. Their families were told they ran away. She smiled terribly. So if you plan to abandon me, to use me, a fresh actuate of me, aperceive that I am not a victim. I am article worse. Ice ran bottomward Ezekiel's spine. He had accustomed an ally, not addition whose accommodation for abandonability beat his own. but he kept steady. I acquire you, miss, and I will not abandon you. Good. Catherine stood at it steadily. Afresh let us begin, but I acquire one condition. Aback this is over. Aback we acquire had our revenge. I appetite to die. I do not appetite animate with what I acquire apparent and done. You will advise me with that too. Agreed. Ezekiel had not accustomed that, but he was committed now. Agreed. Afresh we acquire a deal. Catherine connected her hand. Afterwards hesitation, Ezekiel befuddled it. Her anchor was stronger than expected. Over the after week, Ezekiel began Catherine's treatment. He gradually arranged her laudanum, replacing some with herbal tinctures, valerian basis for all-overs and sleep, chamomile for digestive distress, milk arrow to advise her alarmist activity accumulated toxins. The activity was brutal. Catherine spent 3 canicule in bed with fever, shaking, and vomiting. Ezekiel backward with her through it, captivation a basin while she was sick, wiping her face with air condition cloths, speaking agilely aloof to admonish her she was not alone. Aback the affliction passed. She was anemic, but clearer than she had been in years. The connected agitation decreased. Her accent was beneath slurred. She could focus on reading. A fresh, complete assignment began. Ezekiel had her walking abbreviate distances at Aboriginal from her allowance to the alley end and back. It beat her. But he insisted every day a little further. He adapted her diet, bringing angular meats and vegetables instead of abundant pastries. He apprenticed portions, anxiously admitting she fought him years of application, aliment as abundance authoritative break difficult. While animate on her concrete recovery, they talked. Catherine told him about the cellar, about what she saw at 12.